Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! My sister, she's 25 now, she still acts like a teenager. It's frustrating to watch her float through life expecting everything to magically work out in her favor. And when it doesn't, well, that's never her fault. Take last year for example. Our family already had 4 dogs, 3 toy poodles and a Labrador. We didn't need another one, but my sister just had to have a female poodle offered to us by a friend of our dad's. She saw a dollar sign thinking she could start a breeding program. From the moment that dog arrived, it was clear my sister wasn't ready for the responsibility. She'd go out with her friends for hours assuming someone else would take care of her pet. One time she left for a party without telling anyone, and her dog peed on our mom's carpet. I tried to ask her where she was going, but she casually mentioned she was going out with friends and would be back later. When I inquired about her dog, she nonchalantly assumed I would watch it, thanked me, and left before I could protest. That night I decided to teach her a lesson and went out myself. When our brother sent a photo of the ruined carpet to our mom, all hell broke loose. Our mom questioned why I hadn't watched the dog. I explained that it wasn't my responsibility and that I never agreed to it. When she asked about my sister's whereabouts, I guessed she was still out partying. When our sister finally came home, our mom attempted to discuss the dog and her responsibilities. However, my sister dismissed the conversation, claiming she was tired, and simply walked away, leaving our mom fuming. Things came to a head last week. It was a long weekend and my sister decided it was a perfect time for a 4-day trip with her friends. Never mind that her dog had just gone into heat. My sister announced her departure for the weekend. When I reminded her about her dog being in heat, she casually assumed we could handle it, thanked us, and left abruptly. For 4 days, we had to deal with her dog in heat and our male Labrador going crazy. It was a nightmare. When our mom found out, she'd had enough. She declared her intention to have the dog neutered. I expressed concern about my sister's reaction, but our mom was adamant, stating that my sister clearly wasn't responsible enough to handle a breeding program. True to form, my sister threw a massive tantrum when she found out. She accused our mom of ruining everything and trying to control her life. Our mom defended her decision, explaining that it was about being responsible for the living creature my sister had brought into our home. The argument went on for hours, with my sister eventually storming off to cry in her room. But the story doesn't end there. A few days after the neutering, my sister came home with a rabbit. She excitedly showed off her new pet, claiming it was different this time and promising to take care of it. I expressed my skepticism, reminding her of her inability to handle a dog. I could see the cycle starting all over again, but this time I had a plan. I started documenting every instance of neglect. Every time she left without arranging care, every mess the rabbit made that she didn't clean up, every vet appointment she missed. After a month, I presented the evidence to our parents. I stressed that this behavior had to stop, as my sister wasn't learning anything. Our dad agreed it was time for some tough love. The next day, our parents sat my sister down for a serious talk. They informed her that they were rehoming the rabbit. My sister protested vehemently, claiming she loved the animal. I pointed out that love wasn't enough and that animals needed care and attention, which she wasn't providing. For once, my sister was speechless. She watched in silence as we found a loving home for the rabbit. It was a hard lesson, but a necessary one. In the weeks that followed, I noticed a change in my sister. She started spending more time at home, helping with the other dogs. She even volunteered at a local animal shelter. One evening, she approached me in a moment of vulnerability and she admitted that she now understood she wasn't ready for the responsibility. She thanked me, in her own way, for not letting her fail completely. It wasn't a full apology, but it was a start. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful that my sister might finally be growing up. After finishing my marine biology degree, I struggled to find a job in my field. The job market was tough, and I was competing against people with years of experience. So when I saw an opening for an aquarium guide, I jumped at the chance. It wasn't my dream job, but I figured it was a step in the right direction. Plus, I'd always loved the ocean and its creatures. I thought sharing that passion with visitors would be rewarding. Little did I know it would lead to one of the craziest experiences of my life. I've been working at the aquarium for about 6 months when it happened. It was a busy Saturday afternoon, and I was leading a tour group through the shark exhibit. As usual, kids pressed their faces against the thick glass, marveling at the sleek predators gliding by. That's when I first noticed her. A woman in her 40s with a sour expression that seemed out of place among the excited families. She kept muttering to herself and glaring at the sharks. I tried to focus on my tour, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about her. As I was wrapping up my explanation about great white sharks, the woman suddenly raised her hand. She inquired about the frequency of feeding the sharks. I explained that we feed them every few days, as they don't need to eat as frequently as many people think. The woman became agitated, claiming that this was cruel and that the sharks must be starving. She insisting that this was why they looked so angry. I was taken aback by her reaction. The sharks looked perfectly calm to me, but I tried to explain gently. I assured her that the sharks were well cared for and that our feeding schedule was based on extensive research. The woman scoffed at this, mentioning that she had seen the movie Jaws and knew how bloodthirsty these monsters were. She accused us of trying to save money by starving them. At this point, other visitors were starting to stare. I decided it was best to move the group along and let my supervisor deal with her. I noticed that we were running short on time and suggested we continue to the next exhibit. As I led the group away, I could hear the woman still grumbling behind us. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that was the end of it. How wrong I was. About 20 minutes later, I was in the touch tank area, helping kids pet starfish when I heard a commotion from the direction of the shark exhibit. Screams and shouts echoed through the halls. My stomach dropped as I remembered the angry woman. I rushed back to the shark tank, and the scene that greeted me was pure chaos. The woman was there, red-faced and wild-eyed, swinging a fire extinguisher at the thick glass of the tank. Families scrambled to get out of her way as she ranted incoherently. She shouted about saving everyone and stopping these killers. A security guard tried to approach her, hands raised in a calming gesture. He asked her to put down the extinguisher, explaining that she was scaring people. The woman refused, accusing everyone of being brainwashed and insisting that the sharks were a menace. She swung the extinguisher again, and this time it connected with a guard's shoulder. He stumbled back, clutching his arm, and that's when I knew I had to do something. I stepped forward, trying to keep my voice steady. I pleaded with her to stop, explaining that the glass was far too thick to break and that she would only hurt herself or someone else. For a moment, she paused, turning to look at me. I thought maybe I'd gotten through to her. Then her eyes narrowed. The woman accused me of being one of them and lying to everyone about these monsters. She charged at me, swinging the extinguisher wildly. I managed to dodge the first swing, but the second caught me in the ribs. The pain was intense, and I felt my knees struggling to breathe. Through watery eyes, I saw her turn back to the glass, determined to break it. In her frenzied state, she seemed to think that if she could just crack it, the whole tank would burst. It was madness, but she was beyond reason. Thankfully, that's when our head of security arrived with reinforcement. They managed to wrestle the extinguisher away from her and pin her to the ground. As they handcuffed her, she was still shouting about saving everyone from the sharks. The next few hours were a blur of police statements and medical checkups. My ribs was bruised but not broken, which was a small mercy. The security guard had a dislocated shoulder, and several visitors were treated for minor injuries from the chaos. But the real shock came a few days later when I learned the full extent of the damage. The woman's attack had caused over $50,000 in damages to the aquarium. The thick acrylic of the shark tank was scratched and dented, requiring extensive repairs. Several exhibits were damaged in the commotion, and we had to close for a week to fix everything. The aquarium decided to press charges both for the assault on staff and the property damage. I was called to testify about what I'd seen and experienced. Standing in that courtroom facing the woman who caused so much trouble was surreal. Her lawyer tried to argue that she had a mental breakdown and needed help, not punishment, but the prosecution pointed out her history of disruptive behavior at other public places. This wasn't her first outburst, just the most extreme. In the end, the judge wasn't sympathetic to her claims of temporary insanity. She was found guilty on all counts, and the sentence came down: 2 years in prison, mandatory anger management, and mental health treatment, and she was ordered to pay $100,000 in damages and fines. As I left the courthouse, I felt relief that justice had been served, sadness for the woman's obvious mental health struggles, and lingering anxiety from the whole ordeal. The aquarium offered me time off to recover, but I surprised myself by wanting to get back to work as soon as possible. The attack had shaken me, but it also reinforced how much I cared about educating people about marine life. When I returned, I was touched by how supportive my coworkers and even regular visitors were. People went out their way to thank me for trying to intervene. One family even brought me a gift basket full of ocean-themed goodies. In the end, I guess you could say I got more adventure than I bargained for when I took this job. But you know what? I wouldn't trade it for the world. After all, how many people can say they faced down a human shark attack at an aquarium and lived to tell the tale? After graduating high school, I had big dreams of going to college and becoming a marine biologist. But when my dad lost his job and money got tight, those dreams had to be put on hold. I needed to help support my family, so I started looking for work. That's how I ended up at Super Save, our local grocery store. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid decent and had flexible hours. Plus, my manager was cool and understood when I needed time off for family stuff. I've been there about 6 months when the weirdest experience of my job, and probably one of the top 5 weirdest experiences of my life, went down. It was a Tuesday afternoon and I was restocking the freezer section. We had a ton of vacuum-packed mink cuts that were close to their sell-by date. So they were marked down to almost half price. There was a limit of 3 pieces per customer to prevent people from clearing us out. I was leaning into the freezer, carefully arranging the meat packs, when suddenly I heard this shriek behind me. I nearly jumped out of my skin and dropped the pack I was holding. Turning around, I saw this wild-eyed woman glaring at me like I'd just kicked her puppy. The woman accused me of being a thief, shrieking that I was stealing all the meat. I tried to explain that I worked at the store and was just restocking the freezer, but she wouldn't listen. She continued to insist that I was lying and taking more than the allowed limit. I was so confused. I was clearly putting meat into the freezer, not taking it out. And I was wearing my full uniform. Bright blue shirt with a Super Safe logo, name tag, and even my dorky baseball cap. How could she possibly think I was stealing? I attempted once more to assure her that I wasn't stealing anything and was simply doing my job, but she wasn't having any of it. Before I could react, she lunged forward and literally wrestled a pack of meat out of my hands, tossing it into her cart. Then she grabbed 2 more packs off my cart and added those to her haul. The woman then threatened to call security, insisting that I wouldn't get away with my supposed theft. I was too stunned to even respond. Was this lady for real? Thankfully, our loss prevention guy showed up pretty quickly. He looked between me and the irate woman, clearly trying to piece together what was going on. The loss prevention officer asked what the problem was, and the woman immediately accused me of stealing meat and taking more than the limit allowed. I opened my mouth to explain, but the woman cut me off, demanding to know if we thought she was an idiot. That did it. The sheer absurdity of the situation hit me all at once, and I burst out laughing. I couldn't help it. It was that ugly, snorting kind of laughter that you just can't control. The woman's face turned red. The loss prevention officer calmly explained to the woman that everything was fine and that I worked at the store and was just restocking the freezer. The woman retorted that I should have just told her that. I pointed out that I had already told her 4 times. The woman then began ranting about how ridiculous the store was, claiming that the workers were incompetent and didn't even wear proper uniforms. At that moment, as if on cue, my Super Safe cap fell off my head. I made a big show of picking it up and putting it back on, then pulled out the bin from my shirt pocket, also emblazoned with the store logo. I didn't say a word, just smirked at her. Her eyes narrowed dangerously. The woman then threatened to speak to the manager about how the store hired such lazy, arrogant little brats. She demanded to know my age, assuming I was much younger than I actually was. I calmly informed her that I was 20 years old and wished her a great day. I turned back to my work, ignoring her spluttering. As she stormed off, I heard her muttering about incompetent teenage workers and how she'd never shop here again. I just shook my head and kept stuck in the freezer. Later, I found out from my manager that the woman had indeed complained about me, but when he reviewed the security footage, he just laughed and told her she was no longer welcome in our store. It wasn't the most exciting revenge, but knowing she couldn't come back and harass any more employees felt pretty good. As for me, I kept working at Super Save for another year before I finally saved up enough to start community college. Whenever things got tough with classes or exams, I think back to the meat thief incident and remind myself if I could handle that level of crazy, I could handle anything college threw at me. My wife and I have been together for over a decade, building our lives and careers side by side. She was a brilliant corporate lawyer and mediator, respected in her field and admired by many. I worked in IT, not nearly as glamorous, but we made a great team. We had our whole lives planned out, holidays, retirement, maybe even kids someday. But then out of nowhere came the diagnosis that shattered our world: ovarian cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave her 2 years at most. Those 2 years were the hardest of my life. Watching the woman I loved, once so vibrant and full of life, slowly fade away was unbearable. The last 6 months were pure hell. Through it all, I was by her side, doing everything I could to make her comfortable and show her how much I loved her. You'd think at a time like this, family would step up. But my sister, she was nowhere to be found. Oh sure, she'd send the occasional text asking how things were going, but that was it. No visits, no offers to help, nothing. My wife never liked her much, and to be honest, neither did I. She'd always been selfish, but this took the cake. When my wife passed, I was devastated. The wake was a blur of condolences and shared memories. And then there was my sister. In the middle of my grief, she had the audacity to start asking about my wife's clothes. Designer suits, expensive dresses. My wife had quite the wardrobe for her job. I just brushed her off, but she persisted, saying she wanted to remember my wife by taking a few pieces. I ignored her completely. 6 months passed, I was still deep in mourning, barely keeping it together, and I managed to attend my mom's birthday. Even though I wasn't in any mood for socializing, and wouldn't you know it, my sister showed up with her clothes request again. I explained to her that I had already decided to donate the clothes to the women's shelter my wife used to volunteer at, as per her wishes. I described how it would help women who needed nice clothes for court cases and job interviews. My sister's reaction was shocking. She accused my wife of being selfish even in death, claiming she always thought she was better than everyone else. She complained about the unfairness of giving the clothes to strangers instead of family who could use them. Enraged by her audacity, I retorted that I'd rather see the clothes burned to ashes than on her back, emphasizing that she had no right to them. My sister's face crumbled and she started to cry. That's when my mom intervened, asking what was going on. My sister, through fake sobs, accused me of being mean to her when she just wanted something to remember my wife by. My mom then told me to take it easy on my sister, stating that my wife's death had been hard on all of us. This statement pushed me over the edge. I lashed out, questioning where they both were when my wife was dying. I was taking care of her day and night. I declared that they had no right to her things or my sympathy. Then I stormed out, leaving them shocked. Later, my mom sent messages accusing me of ruining her birthday by being melodramatic. I turned off my phone. The next day, I delivered all my wife's clothes to the women's shelter. The gratitude on the faces of the women there confirmed I'd made the right choice. A week later, I received a heartfelt thank you note from a woman who had used my wife's suit for a job interview and landed a position to support her children. As I sat holding that letter, tears streaming down my face, I felt a small sense of peace for the first time since my wife's passing. This was exactly what she would have wanted. Her legacy living on, helping others in need. I decided to take a long break from my sister and mother, their true colors now revealed. I knew my wife would be proud of me for standing my ground and honoring her wishes. In the end, that was all what mattered.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.